Well, welcome back, everybody, after a long hiatus. Over there, that is Rish.
And that is Roland.
And Rish, I got to ask you, how do you feel being at war with North Korea and China at the same time?
Didn't even really notice.
Well, that's not what she said.
Hey,
so,
look, there's no famine in my country. We have, for the most part, clean drinking water. I know
yeah, don't go to
Michigan's
Flint.
having it kind of rough, but we have a reasonably stable government. We have an abundance of food. We have clean water for most people who didn't decide to live in a mega city built in the desert for some reason, and things are going pretty well for us.
Well, you look like you're not very concerned, and you know what I found so yeah, ironic, but typical in this kind of world and this kind of relationship is the day before there was this huge thing. And really a typical statement again, like if the Americans don't change their way, there will be conflict. The following day, the very same people, the very same agenda is shouting, if we want to win wars, we need better weapons. And I'm like, maybe not shout out loud before you have what you need in order to get what you want. But then again, that's just me. That's just me.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, that's a thing of our species wide. That's something that we're known to do.
uh, I mean, if we were honest about what 8 inches really are, we would have fewer parking problems. So just
And
to
women could effectively measure. It's not their fault. They've been lied to their entire lives.
and
That's not 8, bro.
how do I say that? But it is essentially the same quote saying all the evil in this world comes from short people. That is not me saying it. That is Erich Maria Remarque in the world famous book All Quiet on the Western Front. And the rationale is really those who have the least power to implement their pipe dreams are those who shout the loudest. So, or in other words, dogs that bark, they don't bite. Yeah,
I
but
love it. It's a famous Tywin or Tyrion land. Tywin's the dad. Whatever. Any man who has to say he's king is not one.
that's the thing.
The
That's the thing.
person who can whisper and it changes the rotation of the earth. That's the
Yeah.
person to worry about, not the person screaming into a megaphone.
I mean, just for the fun of it, I'm interested in history, military history, and so on. I looked at this thing and the contentious thing and why people are well, the thing that we are scared about right now is a potential war on a global scale because China decides to invade Taiwan. Yeah, and I heard analysts say, well, no, not possible, not going to be successful. That doesn't mean they don't have stupid ideas. So I mean, I looked up a couple of things, and as we keep saying, facts don't have feelings, facts don't lie, and whether you like it or not, it's, for example, with this kind of scenario, if you can't move your troops from mainland China to Taiwan, there is not going to be an invasion, period. And even at maximum capacity, there is no way that the People's Liberation Army can transport or be transported across the 200 kilometers between the mainland and the invasion beaches, or more, because the invasion beaches are really on the eastern side of Taiwan. With without anybody noticing, that's for one. and it's physically not possible to acquire that capacity. So sorry, but I don't run that army, so no, you don't have that capacity. So
Well, and if for some reason you decide to give lethal aid to Russia, there's a very probable to extremely likely chance that you will be hit with sanctions, and that will cripple your ability to get key components to build basic stuff. That's why, what was it? Russia was buying these smart dishwashers to steal the processors out of them, or smart refrigerators, something like that. You know, the refrigerator that keeps all
that
track,
whole
like it tells you
that
what to
whole
order.
scenario.
Yeah, they were buying
Um,
those to rip them out to put them on missiles.
let me put this whole scenario into perspective. And well, first of all, everybody needs to understand that. Well, first of all, China has been supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine from day one. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who says otherwise is effing lying, and that's the end of the
Mm-hmm.
story on that part. Secondly, the reason why that famous convoy waiting outside of Kiev, not moving forward, has been stuck there for 2 weeks, and then people started walking back, is the supplies China delivered to support the Russian invasion were shit. Another problem was the Russians
Well,
operate on a.
it's a less good knockoff of what they already have built by China.
But that's a point I want to make. I want to make later. Well, first of all, the invasion of Taiwan is based on blueprints of Russian or Soviet military action, and as is the invasion of Ukraine. So that concept, that strategic thinking, is utterly failing. So it's not failing because of for lack of trying, but they don't have the means, and their plan is completely and utterly not based on reality, shall we say. So, but let's go on that in a moment. Let's just say China would support Russia with lethal aid instead of what they have been doing so far.
Openly support. They probably already, but I
Open.
mean
Yeah.
openly, not
Okay.
all transparent. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say they get caught and they can't deny it. Okay. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the scenario, but first of all, if you're talking sanctions, if only half the sanctions were applied on China that have been applied on Russia, you are talking about 500 million dead Chinese within 6 to 12 months.
Famine.
Well, depending on who is making up these statistics, between 80 and 90% of the whole calorie intake of the average Chinese person is dependent on imports.
Well, it's my understanding that Russia is the #1 exporter for energy and food in that region, and China is the #1 importer of both.
There
And
is one problem.
if you want crops to grow where the soil is not well, when you're forcing it, you're going to need
Plus contaminated.
a lot of industrial input to get something out of that soil. Like Brazil has this problem all the time. So you have to basically make soil so every year it doesn't refresh itself, but all of that takes energy. So I would say China's food needs are directly tied to its energy needs, because if you have to create food where it won't naturally grow, you have to substitute higher and higher amounts of energy.
Well, even if it was just that equation, and it's far more complex than that.
Oh, it always is.
The main supply for China from Russia is Siberian oil and gas fields. These oil and gas fields have not reached the capacity and the maintenance level that they should have reached, even after 30, 40 years of foreign investment. And essentially, Siberian oil has been operated by BP, British Petroleum.
Well,
The
better
danger,
petroleum now.
the danger for China and sanctions is not the sanctions. And that is one of the misconceptions that China had about any invasion of Taiwan. They thought, or one of the strategic points they anchored this on is nobody will do anything about it. So first of all, we have the sanctions. Okay. But what will really and has already hurt the Chinese economy is that people and companies from outside China that have been investing billions got up and walked away. They did that in Russia, and if it would happen to the same extent in the same short period of time where it happened in Russia, if that happened to China, if it was not just hemorrhaging, since basically the COVID restrictions were lifted, people have left China by any means possible. And the extent of how foreign investors have abandoned China already is not only that net outflow of capital or outflow of people. We are down to about 25% of the people working in foreign companies that worked there before COVID. Nobody wants to go there. What we are talking about
Well, I mean, you left.
Well,
you're a prime example.
Just one thing.
Why didn't you want to be there? It's gotten worse since you had enough. It's gotten worse since then. So of course people don't want to go.
Well, you can absolutely say that, and it is not. Look, I said that 2 years ago when I left, or when we left. I have been in Shanghai Pudong, I don't know how many times, but this is the first time when I saw it packed with non-Chinese nationals. And people were packed with baggage, you wouldn't believe it. The guy before us in the check-in queue paid, I'm not joking, $2,000 for excess luggage. He didn't care. They just wanted to leave. And
I would have left it. I would have left it by the trash can, said free clothes.
You know, it is not only the individuals. At some point, this exodus will affect corporates. And you know the apparel manufacturer Gap.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Gap.
Billions in the Chinese market. Last year last year they completely sold their whole Asian business for peanuts, got up and left. And if this kind of exodus of corporates and individuals would happen in the period of time where it happened in Russia, basically overnight, then China has an even greater problem than what they have now economically. Economically speaking, I have so many friends still in China, and they are telling me the port of Shanghai is devoid of people. It is full with empty containers. They have to take containers and transport them inland because the bloody port is full. Now, when you say that, you are racist, you are trying to keep China down and paid by the CIA.
Wait, when did that one start?
Well, you know, at least the CIA pays. I no longer call the Wu Maos, I call them Sanshibas. 38.
Can I get some of that CIA money?
Well, you know, you can see where I live, how I live. The money is well invested. But no, jokes aside, is what I like. So what I actually it is a bit kind of perverted thinking actually, but now statistic publications from the Chinese Office of Statistics confirm not only is this happening right now, what I'm saying is happening. It confirms that it has been happening for 2-3 years, basically since COVID. And look at it from this point of view. Economically, there has been a case for moving manufacturing out of China I don't know, for over 10, 15 years. If you're only making an economic case, it is a fact, a Mexican worker that is twice as productive as a Chinese worker and costs me only 70% of that. Yeah.
3 times as productive.
And
Because think of it, it's 3 times as productive because that last guy doesn't have to be on a boat to get it here.
exactly, that's
One of those other 2 guys can load
even
it on a
before that.
truck. There's your third
Even
guy.
before you talk about the shipping option. And
Yeah.
especially this is why the Americans need
America's built on trucking.
Yeah.
Like, we love trucks. We love rail.
So really, this
Rail's
is
getting some bad press, but like in America, like I think it's like 95% of the track that we have in our country is rail line. We don't have the extensive passenger network. So all of the vast network of American rail, all of that's industrial.
Yeah.
It's all moving goods, and trucks, like truck stops is Americana. The open road is Americana, even though we kind of ripped it off, but
well, look,
whatever, we just made it bigger. Better.
No, when you look at this, when you only look at it from the economic perspective and filtering back now, why some people start thinking, no, it's not gonna happen. It's bluster like shooting down Pelosi's plane. It is, you're making yourself a laughing stock if you're shouting out loud and then shoot at fish. So, but the other thing is, what is happening is the Chinese are very closely watching what's going on in Ukraine, and they realized, well, the Russian equipment that we bought, reverse engineered, or plainly just stolen and ripped off is crap. Now you have crap equipment and crap ideas to use it. That's going to be what the Marines call a clusterfuck. Nothing else. So,
well, not to mention China's on a downslide right now, and the longer it takes them, and I don't know why Xi did this, but he painted himself in the corner saying that it's going to be unified one way or another within this generation. You really backed yourself into a corner on that one. But every year that it doesn't happen, okay, yes, China is building ships, planes, they're training divisions. I get it. But see, right now, they're well in the lead as far as what's already over there. But every single day, they get a little bit stronger, but everything else is getting weaker. The army's still getting the lifeblood. But when the economy starts to fail to where you have to stop away from that, China will still build their ships. They'll still get built. They'll still be, but see, every other country that they've been an aggressor towards, alienated, flat out stole land from, killed its citizens, led to the death of its citizens due to their policies and practices by starving people out, the onion policies on the islands, things of this nature. All those other countries are getting stronger every day. India building navy. Australia, I mean, they're not going to get the submarines right online, but instead of the diesel electrics from France, now they're going to get electric subs from the US and UK joint venture. They're going to get 10 of those. And we're even talking about sending them some LA class attack subs so that they can learn till their stuff's broke. If we send LA, even if we give them to Australia and they become proficient with even a few Los Angeles attack submarines, they could be a menace. Just a few, say they have 5 boat crews on LA, outdated LA. They could make a killing in reef sales of Chinese Navy vessels easily. But every country is getting stronger. In China, that when they were the big guy on the block, they were not humble. They were not a gracious God. They were not a just ruler.
There is that.
They were a tyrant.
You see, and here's the problem with this kind of thinking. And I kept saying the problems of China and the government is they have no idea and no interest to understand anything beyond we order, you make it happen. So there's one thing, and one thing I've been thinking about. The approach by Xi has failed to make the world bow to his will. It has failed utterly. And in Beijing, I don't think Xi or anyone in the government has any idea how do we turn this around. There is no idea.
Well, they
And
shot everybody with an idea that wasn't, let's keep going down this path, got shot or sent into exile. So all the people
that's the
that
thing
had the alternative route that knew how to make that plan
is,
work, they literally do not exist anymore.
you see, and
Just like
this
the
quote
Taliban in Afghanistan, the Taliban killed everybody in government and took away all the women and told the women stay at home, and women were in the government. And now they're going, we want to go back to fighting and living in caves. Like, we don't, this 9 to 5 government stuff ain't for us. They killed everybody who knew how to do it. Same with Xi. Anybody who had a different, if you want to try something different, everybody who had the good ideas that wasn't your idea is gone.
Yep. And you see, when I throw the name Zhao Lijian out, the most aggressive wolf warrior or wolf wanker, really, he has been demoted to a much less important post. Some people would say unimportant post, not because what the internet is blabbing about, oh, his wife embarrassed him saying, oh, I can't buy medicine now we have COVID. No, he was demoted because his wolf warrior bullshit failed. It's not the great idea of Xi wolf warrior diplomacy that failed. It's you failed to implement it properly. And as long as these kind of things happen, the lesson people learn is just as you said, don't have ideas. Yeah. And the problem with that kind of approach is you have no ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And
Stagnation.
It's not even stagnation. Even stagnation would be progress in this sense. What has happened is going back to 2012, well, no, going back to 2008. Since 2008, the Chinese central bank has periodically opened the floodgates of quantitative easing, basically printing money. And when you have 100% control over your country and the currency, you don't even have to tell people we are printing money like mad. And as of 2018, 2019, before COVID, they had to create 7 or 8 renminbi in order to create 1 renminbi return as in terms of GDP. And if you invest $8 and get $1 back, that's not a good deal. You would stop that. Yeah. But yeah, that's the boss's idea. So it's a good idea and it can't be wrong. That's another aspect. So, and literally, when all this, I mean, this has been happening for donkey's years, and people have been saying, that's probably not a good idea. So if you are Chinese, you get disappeared. If you are not Chinese, you are called racist and all other names. And also that no longer works. Yeah. If you say, well, the sky is blue, oh, you are a racist. At some point, you stop engaging with that kind of nonsense. You move forward. And the only strategy they really have is doubling down on that nonsense. Because number one, China has always been an inward-looking country, as in we look after ourselves. We are not, looking at what other people are doing and trying to do it better.
Mm-hmm.
That has left them being dependent on getting ideas and IP in any way possible. And fun fact, all the important inventions that have been made there have one crucial component. They have, how do I say that?
Stolen intellectual property.
Besides sitting on the largest accumulation of intellectual property ever stolen and accumulated in human history, what world-breaking inventions have been made there? It's always someone else's
Air
idea.
Jordans.
They have been manufactured there, but the idea is from someone else.
iPhone 12 and a half.
So, these are just the kind of things that let me put it that way. We have trialed these sanctions and people abandoning China already. You have heard about that chip law that prohibits certain people working in certain areas of chip design, development, and so to have anything to do with China. That's basically that law. And that law covers about 5 to 7% of the actual chip market. So it's in global terms, it looks irrelevant. But what happened was within 24 hours, this law was fully implemented and China was cut out from that market. Since then, what has happened is the Dutch decided we are no longer selling these machines to China. The South Koreans said we are no longer selling these machines to China. And now the Germans have come around and said we are no longer selling the parts for the machines to China. So what has happened and what is going to be expanded on, the next bill is already in the works, is to cut out the middle range of chips, which is basically the largest chunk that you can have there.
Yeah, that's your automobile, your aeronautics, manufacturing. Yeah.
If you want anything, how do I say that?
That's your mid-tier chips right there.
Yep. And look at it from this point of view. Even if you are in the top end range, China or Chinese production has always been for various reasons. One of them simply being we did not give it to Chinese production capacity, has always been 2 generations behind. And in chip design, that's the difference between the Middle Ages and the 1800s. Yeah. So there has always been a gap, deliberately so. And
well, I mean, isn't Taiwan does the high end? Aren't they making chips that are like 10 microns by 10 microns or something?
Well, first of all, if those machines are not already rigged with explosives, they have been doing something wrong. And that's actually.
Oh, they would never give that to Xi. There's no way.
First of all, Taiwan had over 40 years to prepare for this war. Ukraine had 8. Yeah. Secondly, those machines, the important ones and the important people, are already in the US. They are no longer in Taiwan. And even if the Communist Party would take over Taiwan without firing a shot, without any of these machines being destroyed, they are not getting the parts for them. They are not getting any new machines. They don't have the people to operate them. They have no idea where to get or wouldn't be able to get the people to operate them. So that piece of real estate is worthless to them.
Dead letters.
It is.
It's a fancy building with some shiny stuff, and most of it's on fire.
No, this is the kind of scenario Xi did not foresee. And to be brutally honest, most people did not foresee the scenario what is happening in Ukraine. And most people that were going on record with it said the Russians are going to steamroll through there. And then people realized, well, if they roll through Ukraine, then they are on the Polish border, and that's not going to go well. So there is that, and you can to some degree. Putin has done it. Xi has done it even more. Replace logic and sense with xenophobic nationalism. So, but the problem with that is there is a massive gap in the logic. Let's just use Ukraine as an example. If the Ukrainians are really all Nazis, why do they follow a Jewish leader? Why do Jewish Ukrainian soldiers fight side by side with Muslim Ukrainian soldiers? What enemy do you have to have that these two fight with so-called Nazis against you? How bad do you have to be? And this is where those narratives keep falling apart. And you see, when you come from a culture where lying is okay to get out of a difficult situation, I mean, I keep mentioning this Russian general, no Russian army here, while the tanks are turning around and round behind him. This is literally the scenario with both countries. And at some point, well, if there is no tank, you don't mind me javelining it, right? Yeah. If there is no spy balloon, you don't mind me shooting it. And really, this it's if it wasn't so serious and sad, yeah. I mean, all things aside, is you or I as a person, we see this, we know what's going to happen, we know it's essentially unavoidable, and yet there is this thing, and I think all Western people are to a large degree the same in that sense, is we don't want these bad things to happen, whether it is between me and you or you and me against someone we don't know. We know, well, this is the outcome, don't do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, well, it is first of all, of course, very sad that this is happening, but it also, or it should show everybody that has been brought up in a Western socio-liberal country that change through engagement does not work. It doesn't. If, I mean, even between you and me, who are both in free countries, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
where we can criticize the government without going to jail, even, yeah, even you and I, we don't, yeah, it's very difficult to get me or you doing something that we don't want to do, whether it's good for us or not.
Mm-hmm.
So it is what it is. And that is, now going back to the Chinese perspective, that plan is completely out of the window. And as you said, basically burning every single bridge you had in this world. For example, one of the things that has been remarkable, Sweden, one of the most open-minded countries, is the country that is the most negative about China these days. As you know, people say, when the Canadians go to war with you, you have done really something wrong.
Yeah.
And it is very similar. If you have pissed off Swedish people, you have done something really.
Yes.
So it is unfortunately going down to that. And don't know if you have heard, but there have been a couple of think tanks wargaming exactly this scenario and talking about how that would go.
Well, I've been watching a lot of scenarios about China and potential adversaries that would jump into the war, especially if the U.S., China, if the U.S., South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan are fighting basically an open war in the air and navally, open warfare with China, that you could see some of the countries that are south of them coming into it, your Vietnams and people who just have been treated unfairly. Then you can see the Philippines, shoring up the islands that they want. You'd see the Japanese making sure, the islands that they have that they're most worried about, their southern islands, which they just move more anti-air systems to. I really think you're going to see a lot of other people. The Indians, I think India would get real bold on the border. I think you might actually see them move away from the hands and fisticuff melee weapon style stuff. I think you would see I would think you would like to see, at first, I think it would be small arms, but I think you would see the clubs turn into AKs pretty quickly. And I think they would only be emboldened because they know they have an entirely different front to worry about
Yeah.
against a peer that's not a near
Well,
peer. India would be a near peer to China, but China would be at war with a global superpower. So that's their time to shine too. So I'm saying, when you've been pissing on everybody's grass, then they see you out there and it looks like you getting beat up, and everybody comes out the house. Hey,
I mean,
everybody
then
gonna
it's
walk some.
that's going to be that's going to be a free for all. I mean, uh, le- when I look at these scenarios, there's always a lot of things missing, and one of the reasons is obviously throughout the Cold War, we have basically militarily admitted about 30% of our capability, while the Soviets overstated their capability by a factor of God knows what. I mean, we can see the practice right now. And it's worth mentioning, since you mentioned India, well, first, and Vietnam. First of all, in the Chinese Vietnam War in the late 70s, 78, 79, 80, don't nail me on it. Vietnam mobilized just a couple of divisions to defend Hanoi. But the local militias, yeah, the Viet Cong, yeah,
Yeah,
they
the hardcore.
annihilated elite PLA formations. And when you talk about India, when this incursion happened and the Indians started fighting back with essentially fists against clubs, is they were beating the PLA soldiers left, right, and center. And the Chinese have not even admitted how many casualties they had. So it's a thing. There is the input. Number one is not there. Secondly, what would happen if, well, first of all, the landing in Taiwan wouldn't go unopposed. There would
No.
be from our side, from western side, as well as Taiwan themselves, massive resistance, and casualties would go in the millions, not in the hundred
Well,
thousand, in the
when you
millions.
saw that the buildup was there, the amount of mines that would be laid in the strait, come on.
Look, even if you can get the first wave to the beach, the first wave would be beaten bloody by the Taiwanese alone. We wouldn't have to do anything. Secondly, if that happens, let's just say one scenario I can think about that would end this war very quickly is two Virginia-class submarines, or no, one Ohio-class, emptying its Tomahawk battery into the Chinese second wave. The war is over.
What happens if you send a wave into the Three Gorges Dam?
Well, that would basically end China from the Three Gorges Dam right to Shanghai.
The only problem is the civilian casualties.
Well, that is the thing, and you see,
Massive.
well, war in theory is very different from what it is in practice.
Mhm.
And in that kind of conflict, if there was a chance that Taiwan would say we are being overrun, we are not sure we can defeat the invasion, it would happen. End of the
Right, but I
story.
mean, to go to there, you know that you're predominant. You are hitting a military asset, but you are predominantly going to kill civilians. But I mean, the impact that it would have on China is as far as its ability, to wage war, let alone feed its own people. If someone did do that, I don't think it can be overstated what kind of a crippling blow that would deal to
Well,
the Chinese country.
on second thought, as you are mentioning, it's not only the immediate casualties. This is also an area of arable land that would be essentially gone for a
Gone.
while.
It would. It's like flushing the toilet.
It
Everything's
is
going
literally,
into
it's
the ocean.
when that amount of water goes
All the
through,
topsoil, all the good land, it goes straight to the ocean.
that is in the aftermath, yes.
Yeah.
And the people that die in that flood wave is just the tip of the iceberg. What would
No,
be
what
happening?
comes next is the people who die from the power, from the famine. That's where the real casualties come from.
And the other thing
But if you're
is,
about to lose your country and it's your last thing, maybe you go, you know what?
yeah, and that is exactly the line of thinking that would prevail at that moment. And the other thing is, not even the threat of that happening can be covered up by the Chinese government. If that were to happen, and another scenario playing out in the prelude or in the opening stages of a war is the collapse of Chinese internet censorship. I mean, I have said it before. If we really wanted Xi Jinping to be relocated from Beijing, wherever he is, to Guantanamo, it would happen. But why? To quote, I think it was Patton, why would I kill my best general? Talking about assassinating Hitler.
Right.
Why would we do that?
Smarter minds would prevail.
That is the issue we're talking here. We are talking about the Chinese have realized their invasion plan is basically not worth the money and the thinking they have put in. And they have absolutely zero assets to make it happen. Again, doesn't mean that they don't get stupid ideas or that in name Xi gets a stupid idea. But how do you dissuade someone who is completely incalculable? You can't.
Well, I think the only thing you could do right now, if you saw like what I was describing and what you were describing, that every day you're getting further away from being able to do it, and they're, you know, and you're losing power. You're spending political capital at a rate that's faster. You're burning it faster than you can replenish. What's to stop you? So to speak to your point, the Hail Mary, the only way I see is you commandeer all the civilian helicopters, anything transport, small stuff like that, the fishing boats, and you have to send everything at once. That's the only way. You have to send everything at once, and anything that doesn't get sunk goes right back, refuel, restock, refit, and you have to send it all right back to support the first wave. That's the only way you got a chance in hell, I think. But you'd burn your goodwill with the civilian populace too, because you'd have to commandeer, like helicopters from hospitals, police departments, paramilitaries. You'd have to just basically commandeer everything and just shoot for the moon. Kind of like, okay, imagine when the forces left Dunkirk, like the beach, in reverse.
Yeah, but look at it. When the Germans tried to invade Britain,
Operation
it was a very
Seawolf.
similar situation.
Seawolf? Sea Lion?
Sea Lion, yeah.
Sea Lion.
So now Churchill was, well, in the military planning for defending against Sea Lion, the British were actually very realistic. They knew the Germans were not going to come via sea, at least not in the blow that would open the gates, because we didn't have that capacity. The Germans commandeered every single river barge across Europe, and we still didn't have enough. And the cost was crippling the food economy across Europe in 1941.
Transport planes, man, airborne, shove them out the side.
And that is exactly what Churchill defended
against. Air
against.
assault, fast rope, helicopter, go.
And basically, when you look at the invasion of Crete, they did it with airborne troops.
Wasn't that where Hitler lost faith in his paratroopers?
And aside of that, even before Crete, the Airborne Command Student had already started implementing better airborne tactics, because the airbornes or the Fallschirmjäger were essentially wiped out in every single engagement they were used. So the later stages, the paratroopers, when they were properly equipped and not only with weapons but also with real parachutes, not the bullshit that we had before. They were dropped into certain battles in certain front lines and used at a tactical level. But what I looked at on Crete is Crete was successful. Essentially after the first wave, the Germans had to turn around their Junkers planes. And they realized by wave 3, we are not turning them around fast enough. We are losing too many planes. They had to mobilize the whole bloody Air Force to get shit done.
Yep.
And let's just say that would be an option, which is not. Yeah, as you said.
One thing to highlight in my scenario, this would obviously include, since China's rocket corps, they're the only one who has their own branch. China would need to be hurling rockets at every surface ship formation that happens to be in the area. They would need to flatten Taiwan as much as possible, soften it up, and they need to be throwing stuff at Guam. They need to be expending all of their missiles while they still have them, while they're throwing everything, like while everything is on the way to the island. Because if you don't use those missiles, when we start putting B-52s and, start putting Raiders and our stealth planes to soften you up, and then just start letting the B-52s just rain death. And now we have these special, have you seen the new thing we came up with? So we take a cargo plane, like a C-130, and then it just out the back comes these racks, and it just starts dispensing cruise missiles.
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna do that. So if they're gonna have a chance of getting anybody to Taiwan, they're gonna need to use all the missiles they got while they still have them.
This, from my perspective, and having studied it, is while Sea Line was operationally possible, strategically going to fail, I don't even see an operational possibility of an invasion invading Taiwan is a military impossibility. And the thing is, if the dominant thought prevails in terms of hubris, we are so good, we are so good, yeah, China #1 kind of thinking. And let's just say they would accept that the scenario is 5 million Chinese soldiers will die. The current leadership would say, well, that's a price I'm willing to pay. So the problem starts then, and this again, going back to Ukraine, was what has transpired since then. The plan is not going to work. The equipment is not going to work. We don't even have the capacity to try and do it. And what the current thing stopping this kind of scenario is exactly like you said, not the sanctions per se, but the reaction of the rest of the world simply pulling the switch on China.
Oh, okay. Scenario number 2. They already have the missiles. They're already ready to go. They made sure everyone knew that they had a bunch of missiles and all their missiles are ready to go. Okay, let's accept that as a fact. China has missiles, lots of missiles. Say they walk their way into a pile of garbage and get sanctioned the same way Russia's getting sanctioned, and they see that everything, and Xi thinks his power's slipping away. What's to stop him from going, I got all these missiles, and he can start sending all those missiles to Taiwan and do what the US did to North Korea at the end of the Korean War, where if a brick was on top of another brick, we bombed it. We didn't go there, but if there was 2 bricks on top of each other, that was the building, and we were going to level it. Could something like that happen on the way out?
On the way out, let's put it that way. If such a thing happened and the sanctions happened before they start seriously attacking.
No, I meant they get in sanctions over Russia before they even start invading Taiwan. They just get sanctioned. They didn't invade Taiwan. They got sanctioned due to their affiliation with Russia, and they got they gave them some weapons maybe they shouldn't have gave them. The West got mad, and they just go, you know what? We're
Okay.
already screwed. Why not just screw them too?
Um, Now, just my line of thinking. If well, I need to send something ahead. Is although neither Western nor Chinese media, of course, Chinese media is not going to cover this, but there is daily violent riots in China against the government. And I just heard just before we started talking, I started reading news that the city of Xi'an is thinking about reintroducing the lockdowns, and it has already
Full
read.
lockdowns?
Yeah, not because of COVID, not because of COVID, because of the common flu.
Is common flu how they pronounce civil unrest?
Very likely,
Okay.
because
I mean, that's a
it,
code word, right?
yeah, it's a code word, and look, you wouldn't believe it if you believe the going narrative about what China is like. Is you wouldn't believe the scenes that you can see in these videos, and what you hear from people on the ground is police cars being overturned, literally Los Angeles riots reloaded. And what I feel is going to happen if there is any measurable sanctioning reaching the people on the ground, no security apparatus Chairman Xi can muster, even if he mobilizes the army to put down the riots, even if he's dumb enough to do that. Think of a China-wide Tiananmen.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he ordered that, and the forces in power will obey, that's another unknown.
Mm-hmm.
It will not be enough to stop a regime change. When you see the riots, when you hear what the people are after, they are not for the most part, they have not as much a problem with authoritarian government as you and I would think. They just don't want to be locked up. They no longer want to be lied to.
Yeah.
And when it starts hitting people where it hurts, which is food, yeah, which
Yeah.
is opportunity. The part of the riots in Shanghai before the lockdowns were lifted were about students graduating or having graduated, having no opportunity in China, and not being allowed to study abroad. So that's one thing the Chinese government is adamant about: no protests from students, because these people have ideas. These people are idealistic, young, and want change. Yeah.
Can't have
So,
that.
and it ain't working. It ain't. Look, if well, first of all, I don't think that if there was a massive scale, even larger than what it is now, if there was a massive scale uprising, is a lot of people from the outside, like corporates, would be saying, this is the moment we can pull the plug. So you see, and like I said, Gap has already walked away from billions of investment for peanuts in return.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm sure they're
and
not the only ones.
no. Well, Apple needs to relocate a massive amount of production still.
There ain't gonna be another iPhone next year.
Very, look, when you go shopping here in the UK, most of the apparel, most of the clothes are no longer made in China. And when you see the scale of manufacturing that has left China in the last, well, let's say since 2020, 2021, and without a strategy of rebuilding elsewhere or having nothing rebuilt, this is part of the supply chain issues we've been having, not only, well, basically across the board, and where it hit home the most was electronics. You couldn't get your hand on computer parts. You couldn't get your hand on, or you still can't. For example, one of the things, I have a Raspberry Pi, and that Raspberry Pi has been out of stock for almost 2 years. Yeah, because the factory is not producing them, and there is no replacement yet. So, but when you look at it, things are getting more normal because new factories in Vietnam are going online, new factories in Thailand, in India. When you look at it, worldwide capacity for Apple, if everything in India works as it's supposed to work, Indian Apple factories or Indian production for Apple can cover 35% of the market worldwide for Apple.
See, I don't know if that's a good idea for India. I think India needs to catch up to its own manufacturing needs before it really starts branching out and focus on domestic issues. They are poised with the fall of China. They're poised to be the dominant country in the region.
You see, my thing is, let's just say we Western countries are getting our head around our approach with China was wrong. We don't want to make that mistake again. So one of the things that I'm looking at, and in my sector, education, it is already happening. Massive increase in exchange and collaborations with African countries. So, I mean, Africa, for Europe, Africa is much, much closer. And believe it or not, culturally, Africans and Europeans are much closer to each other than Europeans and Asians.
Yeah.
And then
how so?
Well,
I'm just curious. I haven't been to Africa or Europe.
Beat me over the head with it. But when you look at successful Africans, they have, I mean, the mindsets in Africa are starting to change. And what needs to change is the mindset towards each other, as in Europeans to Africans and Africans to Europeans. We all know there is some bad history, yeah, but there's also people like Thomas Sobel who says, well, the development of Africa has been predominantly a white people's business. And what we see now, after basically white imperialism has left Africa for 20, 30 years, or more than that, yeah. So I think the last African country became independent in the late 60s, sorry, in the late 60s. And
that's 80 years now.
That is a couple of years, yes, sorry. Do you know what the largest trade good of Nigeria is after oil? Or one of the largest after oil? It's something you wouldn't be thinking about.
I would have said oil if I was going.
It's the largest, yes.
Yeah.
Oil/oil products is the largest.
Cattle?
The what?
Cattle?
Nope. Nothing in agriculture.
Wheat? Okay. No, I was going to guess wheat. Because wheat can be grown on the fringes. You grow wheat everywhere, you can't grow corn or something better.
There is several kinds of wheat you can grow on soil that is completely crap, yes. Yeah. But one of the largest exports and imports of Nigeria is car parts, automotive industry.
That's awesome for them. I mean, way to go.
There is cars made in Nigeria. I mean, the automotive industry is one of the industries that is global, yeah. And the car companies are just putting parts together nowadays, or to a large extent, putting parts together.
Well, they have all of their stuff sent to an assembly plant.
And they manufacture parts. So there is in particularly one company. Let me quickly check the name. Where is it?
Play the Jeopardy music.
Yeah. Here it is. Innoson. So that is a Nigerian car company. And look, it goes to show, just to wrap this up, there is a lot of potential in Africa that is already being used. There is a lot of potential that is yet untapped in Africa, and if nothing at all, it is much closer to Asia than Asia.
Yeah.
So what the Mexicans,
depending on which part of Asia you're talking about here.
Partly, yes. But the other thing is about Asia. Well, in Africa, you have very short or predominantly short transportation to a harbor.
Mm-hmm.
In, let's say, Asia, Russia, or the Russian part of Asia, there is absolutely no infrastructure.
No.
So when you go, I mean, you even see it. It starts at the German-Polish border, and the further east you go, the less dense becomes the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So, for example,
going into the old Warsaw Pact countries.
Yep. If you want to go to somewhere in southern Russia, you better travel through Ukraine, Turkey, and so on, because it's faster. So there is that kind of thing. And if that really happens, that companies are willing to walk away from billions of investment in China and other parts of Asia, let's expand this outside of the manufacturing hub China and rebuild that capacity closer to home in more modern factories, such as automated factories, for example. A lot of those new factories need minimal input in terms of human labor. And if we manage to utilize and rebuild infrastructure in African countries, that would lead to not only a more secure and shorter supply chain for us in Europe, it would lead to a massive boost in wealth for African people. When you look at, everybody knows fair trade. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When, for example, when you decide you move your business from normal exploiting of workers to fair trade business, your people's income is doubled. When you are moving to a collaborative approach in terms of let's develop this infrastructure and we move out as soon as we have our money plus interest back and you take over, you're giving people an opportunity to more than quadruple their income. I'm talking about Africans.
Well, I mean, it goes back to you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish. Well, teach somebody how to fish and leave the boat and leave the fishing rods, and they can start making their own after they know how to do it.
I mean, to finish my rant about this is I want to quote someone, or I want to refer back to someone that I have just referred to, Thomas Sowell, a Black American, and probably one of the most important thinkers in the world right now, talking about not only about economy, but about what we think about racial or disparities, economic disparities, and our explanations of A or B are too simple. And just started reading a book about that, and I think let's make a break here and talk about economic development and disparities in another episode.
Sounds good to me.
Well, that is Rish going on a break,
And that's Roland.
having a little break as well, and we will see you on the next one.